everybody. I have this chronic problem of packing too much content into every presentation, so I apologize. I'm going to try to burn through this. Have fun with it. Okay, so my talk is about the process of making things more enjoyable. Now, the makers of products want to improve your experience, but it's not as simple as you might think. So, before I begin, there's two caveats here. First is all the images I lazily threw together from stuff I scraped off the internet, and they all belong to their respective owners, and I apologize. I'm sorry. And all my opinions expressed are my own and do not necessarily reflect Wargaming, my employer. So, now, although wise people say that happiness is found in people, not things, well, that's cool and all, but people really like their stuff. We are a consumer culture. People want a good experience in exchange for their time and their money. They're investing themselves. They want something. They want a good experience. And if you don't have a good experience, you feel burned. It's only natural after you purchase something that doesn't work, it's broken, that you're furious. And furious people like to go online and tell other people how furious they are. Unsatisfied customers can be very motivated to share their opinions. If you're a company trying to fix your product by looking at bad reviews, that's bad because reviews tend to be very polarized and extreme, and also damage is done. You already lost all those customers, and negative word of mouth is deadly. Now, speaking of deadly, there are certain industries in which failure is deadly, and so those tend to have consumer regulations and protection and agencies around making sure you don't get burned alive or poisoned or whatever. But there are other industries, such as ours, that failure isn't deadly, it's just irksome and crappy. And there's lots of examples of products that either had a product or a product feature that maybe initially failed or didn't live up to expectations. There's a huge amount of hype and marketing made you buy some things, but then you realize you're a sucker, and some things never even got launched because of backlash. Now, it's a bad thing on multiple levels because you can ruin your brand, you can lose a lot of money, and in worst cases, the company could fold and people lose their jobs. And I think we all agree that's a terrible outcome. So how can we avoid releasing products that crash and burn so badly? Well, user research is part of that. It's one of the disciplines in our industry that helps make sure products are good. It's not the only one. But it's separate than things like traditional QA that looks for technical problems and bugs, and it's also different from marketing research that is about trying to explain the value proposition of your product and make sure the right people are told the right thing that makes them satisfied, sets expectations properly. But it's different than those because we are specifically trying to examine the entire user experience. It's about making sure that people know where to start, they know how to get through the middle of their experience using a product, and that they get farther into it. And this is just a generic version of it. It's everything from setup to login to learning how to play to getting better how to play and then learning how to break the game. So great. Let's make games more enjoyable. How do we do it? Well, in general, you can't fix something unless you know how to measure something. So you have to determine how to measure something as abstract as the user experience. Now, this is just a sort of shotgun random approach to saying that there are many different aspects to a game, and there are many different ways you can measure those aspects. Different products have different value propositions and contain different features. So there's no one set to rule them all here, but you do have to break down the whole into its component parts that are measurable. So just so you know, I am a games user researcher. So while everything we talk about is probably applicable to consumer products in general and software in particular, there's other approaches never thought. This is just how I see it. I've been doing games research since about 2000. Here's a handful of the titles that I've worked on in my career. So as I was saying, all of these might be relevant to a game, but it's a necessary but not sufficient situation where for a game, these things can all support a good user experience, but we need more than that. We need enjoyment. It may be usable, it may be accessible, it may have good features, but if it's not enjoyable, none of that matters. So, as John mentioned, enjoyment is just a synonym for many related concepts. The way that I would possibly define in this situation is just sort of a positive experience that is over and above just sheer functionality. Like, it has to do more than just work. It has to be better than that. Okay, so we agree on that. But enjoyment's one of those things that we have this visceral understanding of, but if you were actually forced to measure it, it's more difficult. It's slippery because, as John pointed out, there's different definitions. So what do we do? How do we measure this in order to find deficiency and therefore increase it? Well, that sounds almost like an intractable problem. But over decades of research and practice, we've determined that there's a couple tools that we keep coming back to. One of them is observation, another one is self-report, and the other one is direct measurement. Now, in terms of observation, which is a total workhorse of games user research, it's just about watching people use the product, generally in the context of use, doing things they would normally do. And as an aside, the nomenclature of games and games usability and game user research is notoriously loose. So if I say something, other people might refer to it differently. I'm just saying what I call them. And in this case, I'll call them usability studies broadly for in-lab user research, and field studies when you go out of the lab. And basically what you're looking for is ways that products fail and ways that products succeed. And I guess when I'm explaining it to clients, I might say you're looking for landmines and gold nuggets, but you generally find more landmines than gold nuggets. Once you identify these, you can notify the development team, and they can make decisions on if they want to fix it and how, and hopefully improve the user experience. Self-report is the other version, and this tends to take the form of two things. There's moderated and unmoderated survey taking. Moderated survey taking is the formal version of what is often referred to as playtesting. Bring people in, have them play the same thing for the same amount of time, ask them the same questions, and ideally the only difference is the individual players' attitudes, and beliefs, and preferences. You give them a chance to say, was it fun, not fun, and then you take a bunch of them, like 60 to 70, roll them up, and you can measure differences in attitudes from a bunch of different people. Also, there's endless discussion on how to compose surveys here, and that's a complete other topic, but I will say, if you've never done it, it's not trivial, and a bad survey can create really bad, misleading data, so be careful, don't approach it nonchalantly. Then there is other forms of direct measurement. Physiological measures are about detecting things that you couldn't really measure just by observation alone or self-report. Maybe things like eye tracking or brain activity. These things can be very interesting at an academic level, very sexy, but right now they're a little obtrusive and extremely limited for just broad everyday usage and user research. But they'll get more useful as technology improves. BAI and data analytics, again, it's a whole other thing. This is about collecting a huge amount of data about users, the patterns of use. It's good for discovering things like maps that are problematic or weapon tuning that is skewed. Also a whole other talk, but I will say, the only thing I'll say about it is that user researchers tend to work adjacent to teams of data analysts, and I don't tend to do it myself. So one thing that these all have in common is that they all involve people, and people are peculiar, and we can leverage these peculiar things when understanding how to best approach it. So one, you can't just ask people what they want. You can't say, tell me what game to make, because most people aren't like that. That's what game designers do professionally, and it's hard even if you're trained to do it and think about it 24/7. Also, you can't just ask them, did you do it right, or did you do it wrong? Because if people knew they did it right, or if people knew they did it wrong, they'd do it differently. They'd improve it. What you can do is you can give people something concrete to respond against. People are really good at that. More than that, even though people might have a really hard time saying what they like, they're really good at saying they don't like something. So you can always count on them to give it a thumbs down if it sucks. In all of these situations, you always have to observe methods. So in this case, you have to observe ethics, and ethics generally boils down to informed consent and do no harm. OkCupid and Facebook recently were engaging in questionable research that involved not giving consent. So this isn't irrelevant and academic. This actually happens. And then, in general, it's science, so we have to observe proper methods and avoid confounds and use your stats and whatnot. I could go on that one. Also, as simple as it might seem, once you get into it, it becomes extremely complicated. Team politics, build problems, having communication issues, blah, blah, blah. Or just the participants don't show up, even though you're paying them. So even though it starts out very simple, it gets complex very, very quickly. The benefits, though, are completely worth it. It helps the company with better word of mouth, better reviews. It reduces returns. It reduces customer service costs. It increases retention. But you know what? All that doesn't really matter, because the reason I get up and go to work every morning is because I want to help people be happy. And so I get great joy out of helping other people have a little bit more joy in their lives. And here's some kittens to help with that. So anyway, thank you very much.